If you are unaware, I'm currently on a quest to play every 3D Zelda game in chronological order, which brings me to Ocarina of Time, or Ocarina of Time, if you want to have a correct but dumb-sounding pronunciation of the title. This is considered one of the greatest games of all time by several people. Now, I'm playing the remastered version for the 3DS, but the differences between this version and the older version are mostly visual to my knowledge. With that said, let's jump into this. The story of Ocarina of Time stars the characters Saria, Impa, Naboru, Navi, Darunia, Rudo, Rauru, Sheik, Ganondorf, Zelda, and Link, or as I named him, Mars. The story begins with Navi being sent by the Great Deku Tree to help Mars. After walking out of his home, he sees his best friend Saria, who congratulates him on having a fairy. Once Mars has a sword and shield, he's allowed to go see the Great Deku Tree, who reveals he has been cursed. He then asks Mars to enter his mouth and vanquish the evil within. However, Mars is too late, and the Great Deku Tree dies, but not before giving Mars the Kokiri's Emerald, and telling Mars he is the chosen one. As Mars leaves the forest for his quest, Saria stops him and gives him an ocarina to symbolize their friendship. Mars later gets rid of it for the Ocarina of Time because Mars doesn't understand that symbolism junk. Mars then makes his way to the castle to see the princess. He also meets a farm girl named Malon there. She's the best side character in the game, and also my favorite character in it, in general. When Mars meets the princess, she tells him of an evil-looking man named Ganondorf. She believes that he is after the sacred Triforce, and asks Mars to retrieve the two remaining spiritual stones from the Goron and the Zora in order to stop Ganondorf from having access to the sacred realm. After this talk, Impa escorts Mars out. The Gorons are led by Darunia, who asks Mars to kill the beast inside Dodongo's cavern so the Gorons can eat the rocks inside. After doing that, Darunia gives Mars the Goron's ruby and calls him brother. Then the other Gorons want to give Mars a hug, which goes about as well as you'd expect. Meanwhile, the Zora find out that their princess has been eaten by Jabu Jabu. You would think that such a situation would be pressing for the Goron King, but... After rescuing Princess Rudo, she gives Mars the Zora Sapphire and explains that it is equivalent to an engagement ring. But Mars doesn't understand what that means, so he agrees to get engaged at 11. As Mars returns to Castle Town, he sees Zelda leaving with Impa on horseback. Zelda throws something into the water, then Mars turns around to see what they were running from. So what did Zelda throw at Mars? The Ocarina of Time. Well, forget the fairy ocarina, it's useless now. Mars then heads back to the Temple of Time and gets the Master Sword. Unfortunately, Ganondorf knew that Mars would open the temple and use this time to retrieve the Triforce of Power. Then Mars wakes up and meets the Sage of Light, Rauru, who reveals that Mars has been asleep for 7 years, and in this time, Ganondorf has won. To undo what Ganondorf has done, the other sages must be freed. After leaving the spirit realm, Mars meets Sheik, who tells him where the first sage is. Yet, we are going to cut this summary off here. If you haven't played the game yet, then I don't want to spoil it for you. And if you have, then you don't need this summary anyways. This game appears to have a simple story at the start, but just by having Ganondorf win, it makes the whole story more than just a hero defeating evil and facing hardships along the way. However, the characters in this story seem really plain to me. For the most part, many of the female characters have implied or explicit crushes on Mars, then there are only a few male characters that are relevant to the plot, and most of them are just meant to be wise characters that tell Mars where to go and what to do. Darunia is the only exception to this that I can think of. As for Malon, unlike other female characters that have something to do with the main plot, Malon doesn't mention anything herself that could imply she has a crush on Mars. Her father does, though. Now to discuss my least favorite character, Rauru. I was originally going to say Navi, who is your navigator. Oh, navigator. How did I only just now get that while writing the script? But at least she has a character. Why is Rauru here? What does he add to the story? Raru is a pointless addition to the story, and I will not take that back. The gameplay is what you'd expect from the first 3D Zelda game, and it's fine within that context, but today it doesn't hold up very well. Even jumping, did the goddess just put money in my pocket? So this game has invisible money scattered around, and I just find that this is incredibly dumb. As for the actual gameplay, you can divide it into 2 parts, exploration and combat. Exploration is how you navigate the world and solve puzzles. There isn't much to say about this except that you can ride a horse as an adult. This game really shines in combat, and even that comes across as outdated. The combat involves you locking onto a target and waiting for an opportunity to attack. There are enemies that operate differently than this at times, but most enemies involve the same strategy. So what about the world you explore? The world is simple but mostly open. You can get many items you need to enter dungeons well before going to those dungeons. You can even do 2 of them out of order, which I did. Many locations are good for showing the player what the price of failure is, but I wish that the overworld also did this, though this was likely a limitation of the time. To get an insight into how I viewed this game's dungeons, I will tell you that I recorded very little of them. Many puzzles were easy to the point I didn't want to record them. Then when I encountered a puzzle I did like, I was too absorbed in it to record. Therefore, I only captured the puzzles that were so dumb I can't imagine how they got approved. But there are also temples with extremely good atmospheres like the Shadow Temple. But then there are those like the Fire Temple. The temple I enjoyed the most was the Water Temple. But I forgot to record anything for its main puzzles, so enjoy these graphics I made that describe how you have to change the water level, but you can only do it at 3 points, so you constantly have to focus on where those points are. When this game was released, it wouldn't have been a stretch to call it the best game ever made. However, those who continue to say that today seem to do so mostly out of nostalgia. The game has an incredible story, a world filled with things to do, and more. Yet, I can't help but to see how the limitations that came with it being the first 3D Zelda game affected this game. I do recommend this game to anyone interested in playing it. It is a fine introduction to the Zelda series and a fine game in general. I just can't see this as the best game ever made all these years later. Anyways, I've been Hasbo, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.